Hi, I'm Maura. I was invited to my sister's wedding, but not really. They gave me a seat next to the kitchen, labeled me as single parent staff side, and acted like that was normal. No toast, no acknowledgement, just silent instructions to stay small. But the worst part wasn't where they placed me. It was how comfortable they were doing it. Have you ever been included just enough to be ignored? It was the kind of afternoon that pretended to be warm. The sun was out, yes, but it didn't carry heat. It only cast light on things people didn't want to see. Ezra and I stepped into the hotel lobby. He looked up, wide-eyed at the chandelier, his fingers brushing against mine. I hadn't said a word during the ride here. There were things I didn't trust myself to say out loud. The knot in my stomach wasn't nerves. It was something older, something more practiced. The check-in table sat at the far end. People were smiling, hugging, clicking heels on marble. I reached the list and searched. My name sat at the bottom, literally. A few inches below, Cousin Pam +2. I blinked once. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Taryn's assistant. Hi, Maura. Slight adjustment to your table for Flo. Appreciate your flexibility. I didn't respond. I tucked the phone away and walked back toward Ezra. He was adjusting the collar of his shirt with all the solemnity of a ring bearer. Do we go in now? I nodded. We were guided by a woman in a headset and ballet flats. You're at table 17, she said with a tone rehearsed to sound cheerful. Past the gold-rimmed centerpieces, past the soft glow lanterns, past the tables labeled bride's family, groom's friends, college roommates. We reached ours. It was next to the kitchen door. The card on the table read, Single Parent Staff Side. Ezra tilted his head. Why does it say that? I flipped the card over without hesitation and smiled. Must be a mix-up. But it wasn't. We both knew that. He looked around. The guests were dressed in coordinated palettes. Someone offered champagne flutes in one corner. Someone else laughed too loudly. Ezra pulled at his sleeve. A waiter passed by and accidentally placed a menu in front of him. A staff menu. The waiter blinked and mumbled something before swapping it out. Ezra leaned toward me. I think they think we're working. I reached for my glass. We're here to celebrate. That's what matters. But my hand trembled slightly when I lifted it. This wasn't the first time I had been reassigned without warning. Jobs, conversations, family photos. I had learned to make peace with disappearing. But now they were shrinking Ezra too. I couldn't protect him from their choices. Only from mine. The door to the kitchen swung open and back. The smell of lemon chicken drifted through. Ezra traced the edge of his fork on the napkin. Are we part of this wedding, Mom? I didn't answer. I just folded the napkin in my lap, tighter than it needed to be. Maura? A voice called from across the room. Didn't think you'd show. Taryn in cream and diamonds. Her eyes skimmed our table. Her smile didn't reach me. She walked off before I could say anything. I looked around, looked at my son. If this isn't our place, then where is? The smell of roses and roasted almonds filled the air, but I couldn't smell anything. My mind wandered backward, to the morning 3 weeks ago when the invitation arrived. Ezra was brushing his teeth, singing the theme to a cartoon he'd outgrown months ago. I stood at the kitchen counter, holding the envelope like it was something fragile. It was heavy stock, pearl sheen with gold foil. Taryn never did anything halfway. I opened it carefully, smoothing out the crease with my palm. I expected to see my name, just my name. Instead I read, Maura and Child Table 17. No last name, no title, no mention of being the sister of the bride. Not even a polite miss, just a label. Like luggage. I stood there in the kitchen, holding that card longer than I should have. I wanted it to change while I looked at it. Like maybe if I stared long enough, the words would correct themselves, become human again. That night, I sent a text. Hey, I noticed the name on the invitation. Was that a typo? No response. 5 hours later, Taryn replied, Chill, it's not that deep. You don't care about little details, right? I read it twice. The second time slower. Then I dropped the card in the trash. Later that night, I dug it out, flattened it on the table, and tucked it into my purse. Ezra might want to save it someday. Or maybe I just needed the proof. Proof that this wasn't an accident, that I hadn't imagined it. This wasn't the first time. I remembered the way Taryn always stood in the center of school photos. I was always told to stand left. "You hunch a little," our mother had once said. "Taryn has better posture." Even in group pictures, I was background. Now Ezra was being made background too. He noticed the card, of course. Children always notice the wrong things first. "Why are we Mora and Child?" he asked, running his fingers over the gold letters. I smiled. "Some people like things neat," Ezra nodded. But I saw it, the small confusion, the first seed of doubt. Not in me, but in how people saw us, or didn't. Back at the reception, a waiter brought Ezra a glass of water and smiled. "You're the single-parent table, right?" I nodded before my throat could stop me. I folded the invitation into 4 perfect squares inside my purse. Tight, small, like my name. Taryn floated past, her dress swishing like a silk curtain. She didn't stop, just mouthed something across the room with that perfect pageant face. "Smile more." I didn't. I looked at Ezra instead. "I'm still here," I whispered. The photographer's voice echoed gently through the reception hall. "Immediate family for photos, please." I didn't flinch, but inside something recoiled. I had heard those words before, not as instructions, but as judgment. The same phrasing, same tone, just dressed in different clothes. That moment pulled me backward, 2 weeks ago, to the pre-wedding shoot. Taryn had invited the whole family to the garden behind the church. There were benches, floral arches, and soft music playing from someone's phone. Ezra and I had arrived 5 minutes early. He was wearing his navy blazer and a bow tie he'd insisted on tying himself. I had ironed my dress the night before, picking a shade that wouldn't draw too much attention, but wouldn't completely blend into the grass. People milled around, organizing themselves. Taryn took charge, directing cousins and grandparents like a stage manager on opening night. Lorraine stood off to the side, lips pressed into her usual line of polite disappointment. Then she approached the group of children. "Ezra, sweetheart, can you stand at the end over there? Let's give the twins the center. They match so well today." Ezra obeyed without pause. He always did. He didn't pout, didn't question, just shuffled to the edge and smiled at nothing. No one said a word about where I should stand, so I didn't. I took a step back and stood behind the last row, half hidden by Uncle Tom's shoulder. I smiled at the camera, even though I knew it wouldn't matter. That night, long after Ezra had gone to bed, I scrolled through the photographer's preview album online. There were 24 pictures labeled family moments. I wasn't in any of them, not one, not even blurred in the background. The next morning, over scrambled eggs and toast, Ezra looked up from his juice box. "Did we not look right for the picture?" My hand froze around the butter knife. "We always look right," I said. "Always." He nodded, but his voice was smaller when he asked the next question. "Did Grandma not want me in it?" I didn't answer that one. I should have said something to Lorraine that day, or even to Taryn. But silence had been the safest outfit in this family for years, and old habits die quiet. Now at the wedding, the photographer lifted her lens again. Ezra and I stood off to the side near the bar. Lorraine called out, "Let's get the whole family up here." Then, as I stepped closer, the photographer turned to me. "Oh, could you step aside just for this one shot? We need the clean family set." I smiled as if it were a favor. Ezra frowned. "Why do they keep asking you to step away, Mom?" I crouched down, fixing the cuff of his blazer even though it didn't need fixing. "Let's make sure you look sharp, yeah?" He nodded, but the confusion didn't leave his face. The camera clicked again. I watched as my mother smiled between Taryn and her soon-to-be son-in-law. Her pearl earrings caught the light. Her face looked full. Ezra stepped behind me. I felt his hand press softly into my lower back. "It's okay, Mom," he said. "I don't need a picture of us to know we're family." I didn't speak, didn't blink. Just stood still as everyone around me posed for a frame I was never meant to fit into. They erased me from the photo. But they didn't know. They also cropped out their conscience. 2 days before the wedding, I did something I rarely do. I offered. Taryn was sitting at the kitchen island, flipping through a spreadsheet and sipping lemon water like she was preparing for a state dinner instead of her second wedding. Ezra was in the living room, humming to himself and drawing dinosaurs. I cleared my throat gently. I was thinking, if it helps, I could swing by and pick up the cake on Saturday morning. It's on my route to work. Might save you the delivery fee. Taryn didn't even glance up. Oh, thanks, but we hired a professional team. It's better that way. Her voice was clipped, efficient, not cruel, just final. I nodded, pretended I hadn't built that offer up for 2 days before saying it out loud. Pretended it didn't matter. Pretended I hadn't rehearsed the phrasing 3 times before speaking. She went back to her laptop. I went back to pretending. At the ceremony, each chair had a printed program, folded neatly and tied with a blush pink ribbon. Ezra picked one up with careful hands. I took mine more slowly. I flipped through the pages, half knowing what I wouldn't find. There was no reading assigned to me, no line in the procession, no mother of the ring bearer, not even sister of the bride. It was like I'd been invited but never included, present but not printed. I scanned the names again, hoping maybe I'd missed something. Ezra's name was there, child escort, but I was just not. Ezra frowned beside me. Why aren't you in this? He asked, tilting the booklet. I forced a smile that cracked before it reached my eyes. Sometimes families forget people, doesn't mean they don't care. But we both knew I was lying. Later in the hallway near the restrooms, I caught Taryn glancing through the programs again, adjusting something that didn't need adjusting. She noticed me watching. Oh, we had to keep it streamlined, she said with a casual shrug. You understand, right? I nodded. Again. Of course I understood. I always understood. I understood at every birthday party where Taryn blew out my candles. I understood when she was prom queen and I was her photographer. I understood when Mom bought her new shoes every fall and told me mine could last one more season. And now, standing in that hallway, I understood that streamlining meant erasing. Only gently. I returned to my seat. My throat tightened with every step. Ezra was doodling on a napkin, sketching something with wild eyes and large hands. It was a superhero, I think. Tree number 3, I whispered to myself. In every school play, I was always tree-3. No lines, no spotlight, just enough to fill the background. The music swelled. The ceremony was beginning. I sat upright, folding the program into a perfect square, placing it beneath my thigh like it might stay warm that way. Ezra looked up. Will you walk up there too? I shook my head. No, sweetie. This stage isn't for people like me. The camera panned across the front row. I wasn't in the frame. Again. They didn't forget me. They left me out on purpose. And maybe this is the last time I'll let them. The reception was in full swing. Glasses clinked, napkins were stained with wine, and soft jazz curled around the room like perfume. Ezra tugged my hand toward the dessert table. His eyes locked onto a triple-layer chocolate mousse. I smiled, grateful for even a few seconds of simplicity. Then I heard it, not loud, but not soft enough. She's just the single mom. I think they sat her there so the table wouldn't look empty. Laughter followed. 2 women in pale pink dresses. One had a glass raised halfway to her lips. Ezra stopped walking. I felt his fingers tighten inside mine. I didn't look at them. I didn't need to. I turned us around and walked him toward the back wall, toward nowhere in particular. It doesn't matter what they think, I said, keeping my voice gentle. We know who we are. Ezra didn't reply, but as we passed the same women, he glanced over his shoulder. That glance hurt more than their words. Back at our table, I picked at a slice of cheesecake I didn't want. Ezra drew dinosaurs on a napkin, his head bent low. I tried to forget the sound of those voices. Later, I went to retrieve my coat from the private lounge Lorraine reserved for family. The door wasn't closed. Inside, I heard her voice, my mother's, sounding almost relaxed for once. She means well, she was saying, but Maura's always been a bit of a burden. I froze. Her words didn't hit. They settled, cold and certain. Another voice responded with a light chuckle, someone I didn't recognize. Well, not everyone can be Taryn. I stood outside the door for a full minute. I didn't cry. I didn't walk in. I just stood there and learned something I think I already knew. Back at the table, Ezra was now sketching what looked like 2 figures holding hands. I sat down slowly, watching the way his eyebrows scrunched in concentration. He looked up. Mom, are you okay? Yes, I lied. But my hand was balled into a fist around the napkin in my lap, damp and wrinkled. For a moment, my posture gave out. I sat a little smaller. Not from exhaustion, but from weight, of never quite being invited, only tolerated. Ezra folded his napkin neatly, then slid his drawing across the table to me. "It's us," he said, "but I put us in the middle this time." I tried to exhale. It caught halfway. The napkin in my hand tore without effort. They've taken my name, my place, my role, but they won't take my voice. Not much longer. We were sitting in silence. Again. The music had softened, the room pulsing with low conversation and clinking glassware. Ezra stirred his juice with a straw, eyes fixed on nothing. I could feel him thinking, the way his shoulders rose, stalled, and dropped again. Then came the question, why doesn't Grandma like me? My breath caught on the way in. I blinked, once, twice, as if the pause would help me come up with something more helpful than the truth. "Ezra," I started, my voice quieter than I meant. "Grown-ups can be complicated. Sometimes they don't know how to show what they really feel." He didn't respond. He just nodded slowly and kept stirring. But I knew. It wasn't the first time he'd wondered. It was just the first time he'd been brave enough to say it. And now, the question was here between us, settling like dust on untouched furniture. It didn't move. It didn't vanish. It just sat there, waiting. Ezra stared at his glass a long time. The straw stopped moving. I tried to pivot, pointed out a waiter carrying a tray of tiny eclairs, asked if he wanted another. But the shift didn't take. He didn't cry. He didn't ask again. But I could feel it. The shift in him. A quiet kind of grief that didn't need wailing. The kind that wrapped itself around the ribs and whispered, "You're not wanted." The officiant began speaking over the microphone. The room stilled as Taryn and her groom took their places. I felt Ezra's hand search for mine. I took it, holding tighter than I intended. The music rose. Guests turned their chairs. Camera shutters clicked gently from the side aisles. I looked forward but didn't really see. The only thing real was Ezra's grip and the weight in my stomach. Then he stood. No warning, no cue. He just let go of my hand and stood. "Ezra!" I started, reaching, but he was already walking. Not fast, not nervous. Steady. He climbed 2 steps up to the empty microphone, the one no one had touched since the vows. The room hushed in a breathless way. 100 sets of eyes pivoted. Someone whispered, "Is that the ring bearer?" Ezra looked small up there, but not fragile. He adjusted the mic with both hands. "Excuse me," he said softly. "I know I'm just a kid, but someone needs to say something." My heart stopped. He took a breath, then continued. "My mom is not a mistake. She wakes up early every morning, works all day, and still reads me books at night. She smiles even when she's tired, even when people act like she doesn't matter." You could hear the hum of the lights in the pause that followed. She doesn't need to be in the program to be important. No one moved. He didn't cry. His voice didn't shake. But his face... It was the face of someone who had carried too much for too long. I rose halfway from my seat, torn between wanting to pull him back and run to him. But I didn't move. Across the room, a woman gently set her wineglass down. A man near the groom leaned forward, expression unreadable. And I thought, he said what I've never been brave enough to say. But it wasn't his to carry. 3 weeks ago, I locked myself in the bathroom. I had turned the faucet on full blast to drown out the sobs, cupping both hands over my mouth like I was trying to hold the grief in my body. Ezra had been asleep. Or at least, I thought he was. The next morning, he didn't mention anything. But he stirred his cereal in circles, not eating. And when I kissed the top of his head, he didn't lean in like he usually did. I never asked. He never told me. And now, watching him stand before a crowd of 100 people, his voice clear, his back straight, I knew that silence was unraveling, thread by thread. Taryn moved quickly. She rose from her seat with a glide, still polished, still pretending. Her smile was frozen, like it had been etched onto her for days. She took 2 steps toward the mic. "Ezra, sweetie," she said with a performative softness. "This isn't really the time." Ezra didn't flinch. He turned his eyes to her, calm and unshaken. "Then when is the time?" The mic caught it all, every syllable. The room tensed. Someone cleared their throat. A chair creaked. "You told my mom to sit with the staff," he said, voice still even. You didn't say it out loud, but you made it clear. A ripple moved through the space, not a gasp, a recoil. She's always kind, Ezra continued, even when you're not. And I heard her crying. You didn't, but you caused it. Someone dropped a fork. A man near the back turned away. And still Ezra stood, a child in a room full of grown-ups, holding a truth none of them had the courage to carry. Taryn tried again, her tone tightening. Ezra, you don't understand grown-up problems. No, he said. But grown-ups shouldn't make them and pretend they're invisible. I scanned the crowd, some nodding slowly, others unable to meet anyone's gaze. I glanced at my mother. Lorraine didn't speak, didn't blink. She just sat there perfectly still, like someone trying to disappear into the upholstery. No denial, no defense, just silence. And somehow, that said the most. Ezra lowered the microphone. He didn't bow, didn't smile. He just turned, walked back slowly, and slid into the chair beside me. I thought someone should say it, he said, quiet but steady, since no one else would. My breath was shallow, my hands cold, but my heart. It had never been prouder. My son did what generations before him wouldn't. And now the truth hung in the room, undeniable and unfinished. We didn't speak as we left the reception. There was no point. Ezra didn't ask questions. He just held my hand like he was anchoring both of us. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. The sun had dipped, but not fully set. Streetlights flickered on like blinking eyes that had seen too much. I walked slower than usual, and Ezra matched my pace perfectly. Some decisions don't require noise. They only need clarity. At home, I took a small suitcase from the closet and placed it on the bed. I hadn't used it since we stayed with Aunt Sarah after the fire alarm mishap in our old apartment. It smelled like travel, detergent and fabric softener sealed into polyester. I unzipped it, placed one shirt inside, then stood still. Ezra entered without knocking. He didn't say a word. He went to the dresser, pulled out my folded jeans, and laid them inside the suitcase with care that didn't belong to someone his age. Do we have to explain anything? He asked. No, I said. We don't. He nodded and kept folding. We packed in silence, not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals, that fills in the empty places too fragile for loud things. When we finished, I wrote the note. I didn't want to say too much. I didn't want to give them the dignity of an apology or the power of a speech. I was never invisible, I wrote. You just refused to see me. I have had enough. I left it on the kitchen counter, right next to the bowl of wax fruit Lorraine never replaced. There were no tear stains, only my name at the bottom. The zipper on the suitcase closed with a soft finality. Ezra stood at the doorway watching me. I looked around the room one last time. My old bedroom, the same curtains from high school, the same dent on the door where I once kicked it, trying not to cry after college rejections. It still smelled like cedar and old fabric softener. You're not a burden, Mom, Ezra said quietly. I smiled, but I didn't reply. I didn't need to anymore. At 6 a.m, we carried our things to the car. The streets were still asleep, the world yawning into a new day. Ezra opened the passenger door for me. Are we leaving for good? We're leaving for better, I answered. The words felt light, like paper lanterns drifting up and away. The engine hummed as we turned onto the main road. The house grew smaller in the rearview mirror. I didn't look up until Ezra touched my arm gently. Someone's watching, he said. I glanced in the side mirror. Lorraine stood at her bedroom window. No wave, no gesture, just stillness. A figure framed by the place she had always stood, but now behind glass, distant, separated. I turned to Ezra. From now on, we don't ask where we belong, I said. We decide. He nodded, and we belong together. I didn't look back again. Not because I was bitter, but because I was finally free. The walls in our temporary apartment are thin. I can hear the hum of someone's fridge next door, and faint footsteps above us. But this silence, the one between Ezra and me, it's different. It doesn't sting. It doesn't watch. Ezra is still asleep, his mouth slightly open, one hand curled beneath his cheek. I lie in bed beside him, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to panic. No phantom footsteps, no tension knotted in my shoulders, just quiet. real quiet. I think of the letter I left on the counter. I imagine Lorraine finding it hours later, once the ceremony was over and the guests were gone. I don't picture her crying. That's never been her way. Maybe she reread it. Maybe she folded it once and left it beside the wax fruit. Or maybe she shredded it without blinking. I wonder, was there regret in her eyes when she watched us leave? Or just the cold disbelief of someone who lost control of a story she thought was hers to narrate? The thought doesn't linger long. At breakfast, Ezra slides a drawing across the table. He doesn't say anything, just nudges it toward me with the corner of his toast. It's a house, not a mansion, not a place with grand chandeliers or mirrored staircases, just a simple little box, 2 windows, 1 door, 2 stick figures in the middle, 1 tall, 1 small. It's our new house, he says softly, with just us. I smile. This time I don't cry. It's beautiful. He nods and chooses eggs. It doesn't have to be big, he says. Just safe. The phone doesn't ring that day, or the next. There are no voicemails, no apologies typed out at 2 a.m., not from Taryn, not from Lorraine, not from anyone. I think for a moment about sending a message, just 1 sentence, something gentle, but my finger hovers over the delete button and then presses it. Some things don't need to be said if they were never heard in the first place. By Thursday, I'm updating my resume. I haven't applied anywhere in years, but the thought doesn't scare me. I don't know where we'll live next. I don't know what the next paycheck will look like, but I know it'll be ours. Ezra's drawing goes on the fridge, a single magnet holding down the future. This is the center now, I whisper. That evening, he reads on the couch while I open the window. The sky is bruised with twilight, and someone walks by on the street below. For a split second, I think it's Lorraine. It's not. But even if it had been, I wouldn't have gone downstairs. I close the window. If they want to find me, I whisper to the room, they know where I am. And if they don't, that's okay too. That night, I lie in bed with my eyes open. Not from fear, not from the past knocking, just stillness. I don't know what's next. And for once, I'm not afraid. I used to think family meant being included, even quietly. Just being in the room was enough. But I've learned that sometimes, people who share your name still don't see your worth. And when that happens, you have 2 choices, stay and shrink, or walk and rebuild. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a soft decision at 6 in the morning, made with a child's quiet nod. Sometimes it's closing a door and realizing the silence that follows is peace, not punishment. What about you? Have you ever felt erased in a room full of people who claim to love you? What would you have done if you were me? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if this story reached your heart, type 1 in the comments or share where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, ones that hurt a little, heal a lot, and help us feel less alone.